Hello, Maddie. Welcome to the Business First Creatives podcast. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today because I've been on your podcast and it was one of my favorite recordings this year. So I'm excited just to have another opportunity to chat with you today.
Absolutely. Same here. I've already gotten so many comments from people who their mind has been blown about Dubsado from that episode. So I'm like, oh, job done.
Yes, great job. So I'm going to start with some very basic questions. And then, as you know, today we are going to be talking about your brand new Dubsado setup in your business. But first, tell everybody what you do and where you're located and how long you've been in business.
Yes, my name is Maddie Peschong. I am located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I've been in business for about 10 years now. I'm a photographer, but that job has shifted a lot over the years. So I started as a portrait photographer, said I would never do weddings, eventually got into weddings, as we do. But I knew even when I was doing weddings that was not the end all be all for me. The schedule didn't work that great. I'm not the type of person. I've got friends who do weddings every weekend and they love like they want to do that for the rest of their lives, and I always enjoyed my time at weddings, but that was not my reaction. And I realized that I loved being at weddings and working with the vendor teams, getting to know the people who owned the venue or the event planner or the caterer, and learning about their businesses. And I loved sending them photos after the wedding day and watching how they use them on social media.
Mhm.
And so I just kind of started to pursue that a little bit, started doing more of that kind of photography with myself, bringing more of myself into my social media. People started to notice, specifically people in the wedding industry, a lot of other photographers who said, hey, can you do some photos like that for me so I have something to post online and put on my website? And so that's really how the brand photography business was born, which is what I do now. I only shoot brand photography. Now, there are so many different pieces to brand photography. Most of the time, I'm working with personal brands. So I'm working with women like you and me who have businesses and need images in order to show up online, in order to promote their business, update their website, that sort of
Mhm.
thing. And then I also do headshots and some commercial projects too. So that's one part of my business that's kind of evolved over the last 10 years. In the more recent years, it was about 2019, 2020, I started doing some education and coaching. So that's a piece of it as well. I have a group mastermind that runs once or twice a year,
Mhm.
depending on the year. And I do some one-on-one coaching. And then I have a studio space in Sioux Falls that I rent out to other photographers who are looking to grow their own businesses and brands and need a place to shoot when it's snowing 9 months out of the year in South Dakota.
I mean, I'm in Colorado. Actually, we do have snow probably 9 months out of the year, but we definitely don't have the same level of snow that you
Ugh.
have up in South Dakota. So it's interesting, and I'm really glad that you brought up your three facets of business because um, which ones of those are you actually running inside of your Dubsado account?
Um, Photography and coaching. Whitespace, my studio, has its own thing, but photography and coaching pretty much exist only in Dubsado.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. How long have you been a Dubsado user, and did you try any other CRM before you landed on Dubsado?
I feel like I tried every effing CRM before I found Dubsado. So I was a Pixify user. I feel like there's kind of a smaller subsect of Pixify users. And I didn't have any big issues with it, but it wasn't pretty, which I feel bad saying, but the user interface wasn't great. And so I found myself kind of avoiding it, not using all of the automations because I just didn't like being inside of it. And so then from there, I went to Honeybook, and kind of bopped around there for a while because it was pretty. And I thought, oh, this is great. But at the time that I used it, it was kind of, I don't know if it was in beta or just kind of in the beginning stages. And so it didn't have a lot of the things that I had gotten used to as far as automations, um, and scheduling and all of that sort of thing. And it was just too much to give up. So then I found Dubsado, and it was like the angels sang, the heavens opened. Truly, it was pretty. I like being in Dubsado. It looks clean and organized, but it also is so incredibly powerful. So I've been on Dubsado now for probably about 5 years, and I'm never going anywhere else. I can't imagine ever going anywhere else.
Well, I certainly hope not, since I did your whole setup.
Yeah, right.
I mean, and it's funny that you mention it because I always say that Dubsado is the perfect blending of design and automation together
Yes.
because there are actual CRMs that are more powerful for automations. I left Have for Dubsado and it actually blows many of the features inside of Dubsado for automations out of the water,
Wow.
but it's not pretty.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult. It has a very high learning curve. So, I went over to Dubsado for all of the design features, which we're going to talk about a little later. But I am glad to hear you say that you had the same impression of Dubsado that I did when I first came over. And oddly enough, I have been a Dubsado user since 2017. So we've had Dubsado the exact same amount of time.
I love it.
So let's get to the Dubsado because you felt like you gave up a lot of automations going from Pixify to Honeybook. But when you came to Dubsado, I mean, how much of the automations were you actually using before you hired me?
I thought I was using a lot of them. This is what's been so funny in just the couple of weeks since we've worked together. I've always, like, since I have transferred everything to Dubsado, I've been shouting the praises from the rooftop. Like, I love it. It's great. And I thought that I was using it to not its full potential, kind of like Photoshop, right? I'm like, I know enough. Like, I know what I need to know. But since I've worked with you, I'm like, okay, there are so many things that I was maybe using, but not to their full potential. So I had a lot of emails set up, like canned responses. I had a decent amount of automations. I had quite a few different schedulers, some workflows. Yeah, I think that about covers it. Payment plans, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So I had a little bit of everything, but what I found since working with you is that I just had unnecessary holes all over the place that were making my job more difficult. Truly, like that was what it comes down to.
Did you realize that the holes were there, or did working with me make you realize that the holes existed in the first place?
I think I had some knowledge that the holes were there because I knew that my inquiry process was not as automated as it could be, but I told myself that that was okay. Like I didn't need, I had the autoresponder, and beyond that, I didn't need to automate much with the inquiry process. And I knew that I wasn't utilizing proposals to the best of their ability. And again, kind of told myself that's okay. But now that I have seen like how powerful they can be and how much more easily I can truly sell my services because I'm offering a pretty high end service. And so to be able to send a high end proposal, that's part of my brand, and I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, and just let's put a number out there. What is your high-end offer? So I set up several things for you, but in particular, brand photography and VIP days. Like, what's the number that we're talking about?
Usually it's between $2,500 and $5,000. So depending on if they do a half day session for brand photography, a full day, or a VIP day, it's somewhere in that realm.
And so now you feel like your proposals are helping you command the price point that you've currently set.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there's a confidence level there for me too. Because before I was, and we only worked together a couple of weeks ago, but even in that amount of time, before I was banking on the brand that I've built like on social media and in the referrals that I'm getting to kind of speak for itself. And that's good to an extent. I mean, like those things need to be there. But now I feel like I can depend a little bit more on my internal processes to be able to say, like, not only are you coming from a referral who probably said, like, this was a great experience, this was a great service, I'm also sending you this proposal that says that as well. So it's just like reiterating at every touch point, like, this is worth the money, this is a high level service, you can expect a lot.
I mean, and I'm pretty sure, I think I know what you're going to say, but out of everything that I created inside of your account while I worked with you, what is the favorite thing that I delivered?
I want to marry the proposal. Like I want to marry it. It's so beautiful.
And I mean, one of the interesting things or one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, but if I hire you, I won't know what to do with the system if I need to make modifications and I don't want to have to come back and hire you for every little tweak. But I already know that you've made tweaks in your own system. So why don't
Oh
you
my
say a
gosh.
little bit about that and, the process that you've gone through in taking what I made for you and expanding it even further into your business?
So that was one of my first questions too. So I completely understand that. It was one of the first things that I asked because I wanted a proposal that had like coding to make it really pretty, but then I wanted to be able to take that and tweak it for other options. And I've been able to do just that. So Colie worked on let's see, you did primarily the brand photography proposal. Like that was the bulk of it. And I've since taken that and worked on like a VIP day proposal that you and I kind of like tag teamed a bit. And then since then, I've done one for commercial photography. And that one was the one I was most kind of concerned about because every commercial proposal is so different. With brand photography, I have packages. So it's pretty easy to say, do you want A or do you want B? Same for VIP days. With commercial photography, it's like we need 2 hours of lifestyle photography and 27 headshots and, a little bit of real estate photography. Like it's all over the board. And so I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to put together a proposal that was like so easily customizable for every single client, but it's been no problem. I was able to do that very easily. And then I've also created one for like just specifically headshots. So if somebody comes to me and they want like traditional or even more modern headshots, I've got a proposal for that. And it's been so easy to tweak each section, like what the frequently asked questions are and what like the timeline looks like. All of that is different depending on the project. And I've changed it on every proposal and it's beautiful.
No, and that's amazing. And I'm also very excited to hear you talk about the frequently asked questions and the timeline, because that is one of the things that I tell people. I know that you've probably got a proposal that you love, but I'm telling you that you are creating booking friction inside of your process if you are not making sure that you are addressing frequently asked questions and the timeline of services when you give someone the proposal, because there's nothing worse than having a sales call, getting them to agree, sending them the proposal, and then they keep on coming back to you to ask you questions that you either answered on the sales call or that you answered on your website, and they just don't recall the answer. They don't remember. It's a brand new question for them. But as much information as you can give them inside of that proposal, it takes away all the booking friction so that when they look at it, they're like, oh, yeah, this is exactly why I decided to contact her. This is why I've decided to work with her. And yes, let me just fill out this information at the bottom of the proposal and just pay her her money.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's great. Like, and a lot of the time, I do essentially it's a discovery call, but it's a sales call. And then after that is when I send my proposal. So I answer a lot of questions in that call. So I didn't know how necessary the FAQ would be. But before we worked together in the months leading up to it, I had like quite a few issues with to an extent, I like to blame, Mercury in retrograde or something like that. But there were so many communication issues. And in retrospect now, I'm like, oh yeah, if I had FAQ on that proposal, it would not have been a question. It just would have been right there for them. And it would have made my life a lot easier at the time.
So you talked about the new proposals, which of course are amazing and you love them. What else is new in your onboarding process that you were not doing prior to working with me?
So the thing that you did that kind of still blows my mind is that so I had workflows set up for once a client is booked, this is what happens. These are the emails that they receive, whatever. And you set up workflows for the inquiry process, the onboarding process, and then the actual like delivery process. And that has just been absolutely the best. And that's kind of where some of the holes were that I was talking about earlier. Not having a like specific process in place for if I send an email to somebody who inquired and then I don't hear back for a couple of days, what's my process? Does that happen automatically or do I have to do it myself? How many clients are kind of falling off the radar just because I don't follow up with them? So having workflows for every step of the process has been a game changer. And I don't have to move them from one step to the other. Like there's a part of the automation that moves them into the next automation. It's just like it blows my mind.
Well, and it's something recent that I did. I think I've only been doing it for like the last 2 or 3 months. but your project statuses where people get moved after they don't complete a form or they don't pay you the invoice or whatever. And I've put stop signs on those so that everyone knows if you see a person sitting in that status for like more than a day, they should not be. So you should click that project status, look at that person and see if you need to manually follow up, if you need to send them a text message, if you need to give them a call. Because the one thing, it's really rare, but I have found that it's happened with at least one of my clients, like every single month since January, including myself, is that I have someone who may fill out the proposal and then they sign the contract. And for some reason, they don't end up paying the invoice. And I mean,
Yes.
I totally understand it. How many times have you wanted to buy something and when you get to the end, you're like, oh man, I have no idea where my wallet is, or I don't know where my credit card is. Oh, I'll come back to
Every
it.
day.
And then, maybe you remember and maybe you don't. And so the one thing that I found that was like a hole in my own process that I've now started integrating into everyone else's is the next morning they get a reminder that says, hey, you did the first two steps, but guess what? You're not booked yet. You still have to pay this invoice. And just in case you need it again, here's a link again. Because some people are like, oh, well, they just decided not to work with me. No, I would say, as someone who is super forgetful most of the time, that it's like, oh, I just didn't have my credit card. Or, when I tried to do the autofill on my computer, it just wasn't working. And I had no idea where my credit card was in order to, finish this process. So that is one of my favorite things that I've started adding in. But yeah, you would not be at all surprised, Maddie, at how many people work with me and they have absolutely no automations moving people from one project status to the next. It's like they didn't even know that Dubsado will do that. And, technically it can only happen after certain things. Like I really wish that it could be if someone clicks on an email and they don't book
Yeah.
you, like, can we automatically move them? And unfortunately, that's not something that you can do in Dubsado, adding it to my wish list. But in general, there are a lot of triggers that you can use to automatically move someone from one project status to the next. And I have a lot of people that have like several project statuses in the booking stage. And then once someone's booked, it's like, oh, booked. And that's it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, but what else do you do with your clients? Like, what's the rest of your process so that at a glance, when you're looking in your Dubsado account, you can see how many leads and how many clients you have at each one of those stages. So you had already mentioned your confidence. I want to say, is there a difference, or I guess I want to ask, is there a difference in your confidence in using Dubsado before and after working with me?
Yes, overall, definitely. I do. I think this will maybe be relatable for your listeners. Anytime that, Dubsado is a pretty big piece of technology. Like it can do a lot of stuff. And since the episode on my podcast, I've had a few friends reach out and say like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm getting Dubsado. And a couple hours later, they're like, holy shit, I'm super overwhelmed. And so I totally get it. And I will say after we did like the proposals and everything after we did our VIP day, I felt a bit of that overwhelm just because it was like, I'm essentially using Dubsado, something that I've used for the past 5 years, in a totally different way than I was using it before. And I think the human reaction is to be like, yeah, I don't want to touch anything. I feel like I'm going to break it. And that's why it was so helpful that you had the 30 days of support, because I could just like send you a message and get an answer real quick. And so as soon as I got back into it and was like, I can't break anything, worst case scenario, somebody gets an email they're not supposed to get, and I tell them, hey, sorry, like I'm trying to figure stuff out, And so once I kind of got back into it and realized like I can't break it, this is a learning curve, it's totally fine. My confidence was so much higher than it was when I was using Dubsado in like my previous life. We'll use it before Colie and after Colie. My confidence is so much higher because now I understand like the full capacity of what it can do and how much it can help me. Even things like moving people, we were talking about moving people through the different project statuses. That's only something I started doing a couple of months ago. And it was really clunky because I was doing it automatically because I didn't realize you could do it automatically. So just little things like that, like it's made my life so much easier. And I just feel so much more confident that I can send like really solid proposals and feel good about them and feel good that like my brand is really being communicated to my potential clients.
I mean, I think that one thing that we did that's really communicating your brand, because Maddie, you're a fun person, are those gifts that you made.
Yes,
So, how
I
did you
love the
feel
gifts.
about making gifts?
I loved it because I love getting emails that have personality in them. And I've gotten some comments before when people inquire that they love the way my inquiry emails are written. They're like, oh, this sounds like you. I love that it sounds like you. But I wanted to communicate that further. And I feel like the gifts do such a good job of that. So I was super thrilled to be able to incorporate those. I also feel like, you know, I'll do calls ahead of a session with my client, but a lot of the time, the day of our session is the first time we're meeting in person. And so this gives them the opportunity to kind of get to know me and my personality and even what I look like before we work together, which I think makes them feel more at home too, which is good.
Yeah, and I cannot recall, did you have videos in your process before, or is that a new part of your process as well? Because I know that we did integrate a few videos into your process.
Yeah, which I was really thrilled to because I had some great video content that was just kind of sitting there. I didn't really have a place for it. And a proposal is like that. I hadn't even thought about that, but it was the perfect spot to integrate it. I did have a video in a proposal before, but it was really, really long. It was just kind of embedded in the proposal. Like it didn't really tell much of a story. And the way that we're using videos from how you set it up, it's just so much more dynamic. And I feel like there's more of a story being told.
So, have you gotten any comments from any of your clients that have gone through your new process? I know you've only had it for a few weeks.
Yes. Yeah, just essential. Well, the email automations or the workflows, essentially, a lot of those I already had set up ish. And then you went in, made them better, added the gifts, added more touch points. And I feel like my clients have responded really well to those. Um, I now have a process for asking for reviews, which before I was doing manually and now it's automatic. And I think reviews are an interesting thing because most of the time we just have to ask for it. But if you're not asking for a review, you're probably not going to get one. So that has been fantastic that it just like goes out automatically and clients are able to respond and like give me kind words that, you know, keep you going on like a not so good day, and also help with my Google rating and all of those things.
I mean, because Google cares about those reviews. And I will say for anyone listening, a question that I get asked very often because the email that I end up sending or that I end up implementing inside of my clients' workflows is not an email that asks for a Google review. I just want to put that out there. It's an actual form inside of Dubsado that asks questions that are designed to elicit feedback. And then at the end, it asks them for a testimonial. So I just want to put it out there that if you go beyond the email, it does a few things. Number one, you have their answers to more than, can you just tell me how I did and give me a testimonial? But number two, I mean, Google has been hiding reviews lately. I don't know if this has happened to you, but like sometimes a client leaves a review and it just never posts. And it's like, okay, but my client took the time to do this. And now it's not showing up in my Google review, and I don't have those words to use anywhere else, like on my website or in my social media. So, listeners, I just want to encourage you, go beyond asking for the Google review. Actually make a form, because if you do, you will always have their responses. And number two, in Dubsado, you can automatically thank them for that review once they have completed the form. That is a trigger available inside of your workflows. So I just want to put that out there as a little tip in case you are currently working on workflows in Dubsado and you are not getting enough testimonials or reviews in your business. So, Maddie, let me ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and it's become my favorite question. But tell me about tell me about the biggest fuck up in your business, what it cost you, and what you learned from it.
I was thinking about this because, and I, first of all, I love that you call it a fuck up and not like even mistake, even though that's kind of what it is. Because I am a very firm believer. Anytime that I have like fucked up in my business, I really try my hardest to look at it as a learning opportunity, like what went wrong here that I can fix in the future. And so I have a really hard time calling it like a true mistake because I'm like, well, I learned a lot from that. I'm kind of glad it happened on that scale that one time so I can fix it in the future. And I can't think of any like one specific thing, but I can tell you that every time there's been a fuck up, it's like it's a communication error. Essentially, like I'm not communicating enough to my client. And I guess I can think of one thing that happened like right around the time we were working together. Actually, I had a client who had probably anywhere from like 2,500 to probably about $6,000 worth of projects that we were going to work on over the next 6 months. And I, for whatever reason, I can't even tell you why I did this because this was recently, so I knew better. But we went through a lot of like the planning process and everything, and they were kind of hesitant to like firm anything up right away. And I knew the gal, like my contact, so I was like, that's fine. Like we can just kind of play it by ear. And so I didn't go through my typical process of sending like a contract and an invoice. I mentioned those things. I did not send them. And so then when I finally sent the contract about a week before the shoot was supposed to happen, so way too late, way too late, she was like, oh, we can't sign contracts like based on the business that we're in. Like it's just way too complicated for us to sign contracts. It has to go through our legal team. It's a whole thing. It takes a really long amount of time. And we're still kind of working through if I will be able to work with them or not, because I obviously need a contract. So it will just kind of depend on what they can or can't sign. But long story short, if I would have just like stuck to my processes that I typically go through, I could have saved myself a lot of heartache because suddenly, within a couple of days, I had lost out on what I thought was going to be, conservatively a $2,500 paycheck and probably a lot more than that. And I was just kicking myself about it because if I would have just sent that proposal and, gone through those typical process that I always go through, I would have saved myself a lot of heartache. And even though I've been in business for 10 years, I make mistakes like that. And I think that having systems like this makes it a lot easier to even just remember, like there is a reason for this. There's a reason that people have to pay before they're officially on your calendar, that they have to pay before you start planning. Because now I'm not only out that money, but I'm out that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a really big bummer, and I've learned from it. Now I have this kick-ass proposal, and it will be super great. But it was a big bummer, and I was definitely kicking myself like, I know better, and I still did this.
Yeah, I think one of the things about workflows is that I try to make sure that everyone knows workflows are not just for your clients. They are for you and your clients together. They make sure that everybody has a consistent experience. They make sure that you stay on top of all of the communication and making sure that every single one of your clients goes through A, B, C, D in order to get to, the shoot or the service that you're providing. And so it's great to have workflows. It's great to have these things in place because if you ever want to know where any of your clients are within their process, all you have to do is look at their project inside of Dubsado. One spot, you go, you type in their name in the search, their project pops up. You can see every email that you've sent them, every form that they've completed. You can get the whole story of these clients inside of that project rather than wondering if you had gotten it back. Because what if you hadn't sent it the week before? Like, what if you had actually done the project and then you remembered that you hadn't gotten a signed contract back and then they refused to sign it? It's like, okay, well, what do you do then? You've already done, a big portion of the work. And I mean, we all know from a photography perspective, one of the biggest things that someone is signing in the contract is acknowledging that you still own the copyright. And I can just imagine that would have been like a big stick if, you had gotten and you had actually done the job and then they refused to sign the contract. Is there anything about working with me that surprised you?
Well, one of the things that I like mega failed at, I will tell your listeners to not be like me, is that there's a decent amount of prep involved. And now that I've gone through it, I can tell you, I mean, not that I didn't realize this at the time, I was just being I don't know, spacey. Um, but there's a decent amount of prep involved, and there's a reason for that. It was really, really helpful. I did everything very last minute. Don't be like me. Colie was very forgiving. But there's a reason that prep is there, and it is actually very helpful and beneficial for you and your business to go through the prep that Colie sends you like ahead of time, not the night before, because there were a lot of really thoughtful questions and just things that I needed to think through. Even just things like making sure that you have all of your like fonts and colors that you like to use in one spot, so you can create like a proposal that looks spot on to my brand. The prep is such an important part of like how much you're able to accomplish on the actual VIP day. So even though it can feel a little bit overwhelming, I feel like your process is very streamlined. Like I tend to kind of look at the whole picture and be like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of stuff. Once you start going through it, like Colie really leads you through the entire process. It's not scary. It's just going to take a little bit of time. Make sure you actually do
it. Well, and the funny thing is, I mean, I try to make sure that I warn you on the website, on the sales call, when I send you, the forms. I try to emphasize how important they are, but it never fails that what someone thinks is so awesome at the end is they're like, you asked me that question and I had never really thought about that. And that just spawned like an entire new workflow. Because one of the things that people don't realize when they come to work with me is, yes, I'm setting up your Dubsado, but really I'm giving all of your business processes a makeover. Like whether or not we are thinking about adding additional touch points into your customer journey, whether or not we're thinking about what you're going to send manually and what you're going to do automatically. Like all of these things not only enhance your customer's experience, but it also enhances like your ability to work with that one client or work with many more clients because now you've got this process down. But and I'm happy that you loved the pre-work, because I will tell you, like I've been doing VIP days for 18 months. And that is the one thing that I have tried to improve after each and every one of the clients that I work with, is making sure that all of my forms are asking all of the questions, because there's nothing worse than me getting on an implementation day, starting to build out your workflows, starting to make your forms, and realizing that there are questions that I did not ask you. Because then instead of, this amazing spa day that I told you to go take, I'm having to track you down in email or an Instagram DMs like, hey, can you just tell me this? I didn't seem to get this in any of your pre-work. So it is one of the things that has gradually expanded for these, the entire 18 months that I've been offering VIP days. And the pre-work looks very different now than it did with those first few customers. I mean, every time I got to an implementation day and I was like, oh, well, I wish I'd asked the client this. I have a little notepad next to my desk. I write it down. When I'm done with that VIP day, I automatically go to the pre-work and figure out where it has to go. And where initially I was only working with photographers, which I have to say, even though all of us do different things, like last month, I worked with you as a brand photographer. I worked with Tori, who does corporate headshot events, like huge, like commercial, like at conferences type of things. But I mean, each of your processes was so different, but you're photographers and I'm a photographer. And so I get it. But as I have expanded my work to like website designers and copywriters, I mean, they have completely different things that they ask their clients for. And so it is a fine line of making sure that the pre-work does not seem overwhelming, but that you are giving me all of the information that you currently have on your business. And I'm also forcing you to think, okay, this is the time when we're going to give your whole business a makeover. Everything is going to work better. So in your wildest dreams, what do you think that we could add in order to make your customer experience that much better? So, I mean, and anybody who's listening, I conservatively tell you to put aside 4 to 5 hours. I have had, every once in a while I ask my clients, well, how long did it take you to do the pre-work? So Maddie, how long in total do you think it took you to do the pre-work?
It probably took about 3 hours, I would say, like 3 to 4, and it was broken up. I didn't sit down and do it all at once. There's a couple of different forms, but yeah, I would say like 3, maybe 4 hours. And another thing that I thought of as you were talking, the pre-work is so beneficial to like you as the client too, because I think one of the biggest surprises to this VIP day is how hands off it was for me. Like I've done VIP days before where I'm kind of sitting like shoulder to shoulder with the service provider and we're going through things together, and that's fine, but I'm like kind of exhausted at the end of that day too. And with you, like we did our like initial call in the morning, went through some things, and then I made sure I was available to check like the proposal and stuff as you were working. But I got a lot of work done that day. Like I just kind of did my own thing, and that was because of the pre-work. So
Mhm.
that was awesome because I truly felt like I like had a really fun hangout day, and at the end of the day I have like a totally new back end of my business.
I recently interviewed one of my other clients, and what she said was that all of a sudden she woke up one day and she realized that she didn't have anything to do. Like all the emails were being sent, all the contracts were out. She was like, I literally did not know what to do when I woke up in the morning. And this was me. Oh, but you get to enjoy your morning cup of coffee. Like that's what you're telling me. I think that's every businesswoman's dream, to be able to wake up in the morning and just enjoy your coffee without having to go through all your emails and see where all your clients are in your process. So that's really good to hear, Maddie. Any final thoughts on your brand new Dubsado account or working with me, or just what you have planned, for your own business in the next 12 months?
Oh, I had such a good experience working with you. Like I said, I really felt like, and even when I first came to you, I had kind of said, like, I feel like my Dubsado is not that bad. Like, I want to work with you for the proposal aspect, but I don't know if I need a ton of help in the other areas. Let me tell you, I was wrong. I needed help. I needed help. There were just these kind of invisible holes that were happening, and now I feel like it's like a sinking ship with all the holes. I feel like the holes have been plugged and like everything is good. And I, especially in the summer where we're recording right now at the end of June or middle of June, I try to take the majority of the summer off because my kids are home from school. And so to have mornings, because email is 100% the thing that stresses me out the most. And to be able to wake up in the morning and not open up my email until quiet time after lunch and not feel guilty about that, because I know that people are moving through the workflow that they need to move through. My inquiries are getting responded to. They're getting those automatic responses, and then I'll respond to them as soon as I log on. There's just a real like sense of peace that comes with that, because I don't want to be attached to my email, especially this time of year. Or even just like checking in on clients and seeing where they're at in the process. That's just all kind of handled now. So I'm super thankful because I feel like I can really enjoy the next couple of months and not have to micromanage my business.
Micromanaging your business. I like that. Don't be surprised when you see that on Instagram, girl.
Perfect.
Well,
Make
thank
it
you
a
so much for
meme.
chatting with me today, Maddie. I really enjoyed it. And I'm going to have you back on the podcast for a non case study episode so that we can talk about profiting from your craft, because I think that that is a part where you excel. Maddie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And that's it, guys. Thank you for listening.